Okay, so you want to own an RV park, 80 acres near a lake, 60 sites with power pedestals and sewer connections, a gravel loop road, a small office with a laundry room and a shower house, and a sign at the entrance with your name on it. Guests arrive in vehicles worth more than your house. Stay 4 nights, pay $180, and leave the site cleaner than they found it. You wave from the office? That's the picture. And unlike most of the businesses in this series, the picture is genuinely pleasant. People are on vacation. Nobody is having the worst day of their life in your parking lot. So here's the problem. Stand in the middle of that loop road and count what you own. Dirt, gravel, pipe, wire, and a shower house. You do not own a single thing your guests are sleeping in. The entire depreciating asset, the $400,000 coach, the trailer, the converted van, arrives on its own wheels, stays a while, and drives away again. That sounds like the best arrangement in real estate, and in one way it is. Your guests finance, insure her, maintain, and depreciate the expensive half of the transaction on your behalf, and then they take it home with them. But it has a consequence almost nobody thinks through. You have no rooms. You have no inventory you can renovate into a higher rate. There is no version of this where you spend money on the interiors and charge more. What you are selling is a hookup and a reason to be there. And that hookup can be sold 2 completely different ways. You can sell it by the night, $58, to somebody passing through who will be gone Sunday. Or you can sell it by the month, $625, to somebody who is not going anywhere. Those are not 2 prices for the same product. They are 2 different businesses running on the same gravel at the same time, which means an RV park is not really a campground. It is a hotel and an apartment building occupying the same 60 rectangles. And every rectangle is a switch. Your entire return depends on how many switches are set which way, and on whether you set them or simply let them fall. Hold on to that, because it explains everything that follows, including the way these places actually die. Let's start with what you're buying, because the term covers an enormous range. At the bottom is the roadside overnight park. 20 to 40 sites near an interstate exit, gravel, back-in, 30 amp. Nobody stays 2 nights. It exists because people get tired. Lowest rate, lowest expectations, and completely dependent on the road staying where it is. Then the destination park, sited on a lake, a river, a mountain access road, or the gate of a national forest. Guests come for the place, not the pavement. Higher rates, longer stays, and heavy seasonality. The whole year happens in about 150 nights. Then the resort, concrete pads, full hookups at 50 amps, a pool, a clubhouse, organized activities, and site widths that let a 40-foot coach open both slide-outs without touching the neighbor, highest rates in the industry, and the highest construction cost per site by a wide margin. Then the seasonal migration park, warm climate, minimal transient business, hundreds of sites rented 4 to 6 months at a time to the same people who came last year and will come next year. Predictable, low turnover, and quietly closer to an apartment complex than a campground. Then the workforce park, built near an extraction site, a construction project, or a plant expansion. Full at premium rates the day it opens, for exactly as long as the project lasts. And then the hybrid, which is what most parks actually are. Some transient, some long-term, some seasonal. Drifting between the 3 without anybody having planned it. Each answers the same question differently. Are you selling nights or are you selling months? That decision sets your rate, your labor model, your season, and your buyer. Now, what it costs? You think the expensive part is the land. Land is significant, but it is rarely the thing that decides the project. What decides it is buried. Every site needs 3 connections: power, water, and sewer. Power means a pedestal with breakers, and behind that pedestal, a distribution system, and behind that, a transformer with a finite capacity. Water means a distribution loop. And if you're on a well with enough production to serve peak demand, at 7 in the evening when every rig in the park is running a shower. Sewer means either a connection to a municipal system, which is uncommon at the edge of a lake, or a septic system with a drain field, or, above a certain size, a small wastewater treatment plant that you own, permit, monitor, and report on. Then the roads. A loop wide enough for a 60-foot combination to turn, without cutting the corner off your landscaping. Then the pads themselves, gravel, or the concrete that lets you charge resort rates. Then the shower house, the laundry, the office, the electrical service, the engineering, and the permits. And then the connection nobody budgeted for 30 years ago, which is now the second thing every guest checks after the power: the internet. covering 80 acres of trees and metal boxes with usable connectivity, means a real backhaul circuit and a distributed system of access points on poles. And it is genuinely difficult because the interior of a recreational vehicle is a Faraday cage on wheels. It costs money every month, it generates no revenue, and it is one of the two things guests complain about most. The other is the power. A well-built full hookup site on land you already own commonly runs somewhere between $15,000 and $35,000 all in. Multiply that by 60 and add the land, and you understand why almost nobody builds these from raw ground anymore. Most people buy an existing park, which means most people buy somebody else's infrastructure decisions, made under a code that no longer applies, for vehicles that no longer exist. And that brings us to the cost that catches nearly every first-time buyer. It's the electricity. Specifically, it's amperage. The park you're buying was probably built between the early 70s and the mid-90s. The vehicles it was designed for were 28 feet long, weighed 6,000 pounds, and pulled 30 amps with one air conditioner. The vehicles arriving today are 43 feet long, weigh 34,000 pounds, and pull 50 amps with two air conditioners, a residential refrigerator, an induction cooktop, a washer-dryer, and a heat pump. A growing number arrive towing an electric vehicle they would very much like to charge. Every one of those rigs is a larger electrical load than the park was wired for, and the failure does not announce itself politely. It shows up as breakers tripping in the second row on the hottest afternoon of the year, which guests experience as your park being broken, and which they write down. Upgrading service across an occupied park means trenching the loop, replacing pedestals, pulling new conductors, and frequently a new transformer and a new service entrance from the utility. It is a 6-figure project on a small park and a 7-figure project on a large one. It cannot be done in season, and it produces no new revenue whatsoever. You spend $250,000 so that the sites you already have keep working. Sewer is the same shape of problem, one layer down. A drain field sized for weekend transients is not sized for 30 long-term residents doing laundry every day for 8 months. These systems fail slowly, then all at once, and always during the season. So the number that matters when you buy is not the site count. It's how many of those sites can actually deliver 50 amps and take the flow simultaneously in August. Which brings us to location, and here the usual advice is wrong. For most businesses in this series, location is a question about traffic. For an RV park, it is a question about a demand generator, a specific reason people are in that area at all. A lake with a boat ramp, a national park gate, a river, a ski hill, a speedway, a warm climate in a cold country, a refinery turnaround, a university stadium. You are structurally a parasite on that reason. You did not create it, you cannot maintain it, and you generally cannot replace it, which means the questions that decide your revenue are questions about somebody else's asset. Is the lake managed for recreation or for irrigation? Because a reservoir drawn down 30 feet in July is a mud flat, and your lakeside park is now a gravel lot with a view of a mud flat. Is the gate you sit outside of adding a reservation requirement? Is the plant expansion 2 years from finishing? And the closer your park sits to a single demand generator, the better it performs, and the more completely it depends on something you don't control. Now the mechanism. This is the part that decides whether you make money. Take one site, sell it by the night at $58. If it's occupied 20 nights in a month, that site produced $1,160. And it cost you a reservation system, a card fee, a cleaning pass, an arrival, a departure, and somebody available to answer the phone. Now, sell the identical site by the month at $625 plus metered electricity, roughly half the revenue, but no reservation, no turnover, no marketing, no arrival, no departure, no phone call, and no vacancy in February. Which is better? It depends entirely on your season, and that is exactly the trap, because the answer changes across the year while the site does not. In peak season, a transient site is worth 2 to 3 times a monthly site. In the off-season, a transient site is worth almost nothing, and a monthly site is worth precisely what it was worth in July. So here's what happens to real parks. It happens slowly enough that nobody notices. The season ends, the park empties. A guest who has been there 3 weeks asks whether there's a monthly rate. Of course there is. That site was going to sit empty until spring anyway. So the answer is yes, and it is the right answer. Spring arrives. The monthly guest is still there. They have been a model tenant. They pay on time. They mow around their site. They show the new arrivals where the water shutoff is. Or asking them to leave so you can sell their site by the night to a stranger feels absurd. So they stay, and the next autumn, 2 more do the same thing. Do that for 6 years, and you have not made a single bad decision. You have made 12 entirely reasonable ones. And you now own a mobile home community with a sign out front that says RV Resort. That is the core mechanism of this business. And it is the opposite of the usual failure. Nothing broke. Nobody stopped paying. Your occupancy is higher than it has ever been. And your revenue per site has fallen by 40% because you sold your peak season away one autumn at a time to guests who were never going to leave. The mix is the business. And the mix has a current, and the current runs one direction. Now, why do transient guests choose you at all, given that you are competing with every other gravel loop within an hour? Not the sunset, the arrival. Understand what the 90 seconds after your gate actually contain. Somebody is driving a 40-foot vehicle. They operate maybe 15 days a year. They are tired, and their entire family is watching. They have to find the site, get into it, get level, and get connected. If the site is a back-in on a curve with a tree at the corner, that is a 20-minute event involving a spotter and raised voices. If it's a pull-through, wide, level, with the pedestal on the correct side, it's 90 seconds and nobody says anything at all. That is the product. Site width, levelness, pull-through, and 50 amps that actually holds. Everything else, the pool, the mini golf, the fire ring, is why they picked the area. Those 4 things are why they picked you. And why they write the review that makes the next 12 people pick you. Because your marketing channel is not advertising. It's a review written by somebody who is still annoyed about the tree. And that review is worth understanding properly. Because it is the only place where the 2 halves of your business meet. A transient guest is choosing between 4 parks on a screen at 70 miles an hour before they need to stop. They are not reading your description. They are reading a number and a photograph of a site, and the number was set by people who arrived tired, which is also why rate management in this business is cruder than in a hotel and matters more. You have 150 nights, and inside those, maybe 25 that sell out no matter what you charge. Operators who leave a flat rate across the whole season are giving away the only pricing power they have. Operators who set a 2 or 3 night minimum on peak weekends stop losing a 2-night booking to a 1-night booking that strands a Saturday. It is not sophisticated. It is a rule about minimum stays and a higher rate on the nights that fill themselves. And it is worth more than every amenity you could build. There's a legal layer underneath the mix, and it genuinely separates the operators who do this well from the ones who learn it the hard way. A guest is not a tenant. A tenant is not a guest. And the line between them is a number of days. In many jurisdictions, once somebody occupies a site past a threshold, often 28 or 30 days, sometimes with a specific paperwork requirement, they stop being a transient occupant and acquire the protections of a residential tenant, which means removing them is no longer a matter of asking them to leave. It is a legal process, with notice periods and filings and a court date, measured in months, during which the site earns nothing and cannot be sold to anybody else. Operators who take this seriously build around it deliberately, written site agreements with defined terms, documented checkout and re-registration where the local rule requires it, clear standards on vehicle condition and age, and a firm position on what may be built beside a site, because sheds, decks, skirting, and fences are not aesthetic questions. They are evidence about whether somebody is camping or living there. Operators who don't take it seriously discover the rule during their first attempt to remove one problem resident, and the answer arrives in the middle of peak season. There's one more piece of the mix that doesn't show up in the site count, and it is unique to this industry. A large share of the labor in RV parks is paid in sites. The arrangement is common enough to have its own name. Somebody arrives in their own vehicle, works a set number of hours a week, in the office, on the mower, or cleaning the shower house, and in exchange receives a free site with hookups, sometimes with an hourly wage on top of that, sometimes not, depending on the jurisdiction and how the arrangement is structured. For a seasonal business, this solves a real problem. You need 6 people in July and 1 in February, and hiring 6 seasonal employees in a rural county where nobody lives is close to impossible. This is how the industry answers. That, and for many parks, it is the only workable answer. But look at what it costs, because it is not free labor. Every site you hand over is a site you cannot rent, in the exact months when that site is worth the most. 3 sites given to seasonal staff during the season are 3 peak season sites removed from inventory. which, at your peak rate, is real money. That never appears as a wage on any statement. It appears as a lower occupancy number that nobody can explain. It is often still the right trade. It is just a trade, and it belongs in the mix alongside the transient and the monthly, because it is a third way of setting the same switch. So how do these actually break? The first way is the demand generator. Consider a workforce park built for a project. 60 sites, full at $95 a night the week it opened. Every site occupied by somebody whose employer is paying. Occupancy is 100% for 2 years, and the owner is drawing a return that looks impossible. Then the project finishes. There is no second market. Nobody vacations there. The town has no lake. Occupancy does not decline gradually. It goes from full to 9 sites in about 6 weeks, because everyone leaves for the same reason on roughly the same schedule. The infrastructure is excellent. The location is correct for a thing that is over, and the park is now worth land value. The second way is quieter and far more common, and we have already described it. The park converts, revenue per site falls, the season disappears, and critically, the buyer changes. A transient park with a strong season sells as hospitality, priced on revenue with upside. A park that is 90% long-term sells as a mobile home community, priced at a lower multiple with a discount for tenancy exposure, and another for the condition of 30 vehicles that have not moved in 4 years. You get hit twice, the income falls, and the multiple applied to it falls with it. So let's do the math plainly. 60 sites, 30 run transient, 30 run long-term. The transient 30. Peak season is about 150 nights at 85% occupancy at $58. Call it $220,000. The remaining 215 nights run around 25% occupancy at a lower rate, which adds about $75,000. So roughly $295,000 from 30 sites. The long-term 30. $625 a month, 95% occupied, 12 months. About $214,000. Total revenue. Call it $510,000, plus 15 from laundry, the store, and propane, $525. Now costs, and this is where an RV park differs sharply from storage. This is a hospitality business. You need somebody in the office, somebody cleaning the shower house every day, somebody mowing 80 acres, and somebody answering the phone. Add electricity, water, sewer or plant operation, insurance, property tax, reservation software, card processing on nearly all of it, marketing, and a genuine repair budget for buried infrastructure. That runs 45 to 55% of revenue. Call it $265,000. Net operating income, about $260,000. Against a purchase price of $2,800,000. That's a capitalization rate around 9.25. Debt of $2.1 million on 25 years runs about $175,000 annually, leaving $85,000 of cash flow on $700,000 of equity, around 12%. Now run the drifted version. Same park, 6 years later, 45 sites long-term, 15 transient. Long-term revenue rises to $320,000. Transient falls to $150,000. Total $470,000, $55,000 less. Costs come down slightly because there is less turnover and less marketing. So call it $255,000. Net operating income of $215,000. Cash flow drops from $85,000 to $40,000. And when you sell, the buyer no longer prices it as a resort. Same 60 sites, same power, same lake. Which is why the operators who do best treat the nightly rate as one line among several. Start with the sites you can add on land you already own. A row of pull-throughs at the back of the property is the highest return capital you will ever deploy because the road, the office, and the staff already exist. Then the accommodations you supply yourself. Cabins, park models, a handful of canvas units on platforms. They break the rule we opened with because now you own a depreciating structure. But they rent at 3 to 5 times a site rate. They serve people who don't own a vehicle at all. And they extend your season at both ends. Then the things a captive guest buys on site. Propane, firewood, ice, laundry, a small store, a dump station for people who aren't staying, and rentable storage for the boat they towed in. Then events. A park with a field and a pavilion can sell a rally, a club gathering, or a group weekend at a rate no individual guest would pay. And it fills midweek nights that would otherwise be empty. None of it is glamorous. Together, it can add 20 to 30% to the top line. And it is the only part of the business that does not depend on somebody else's lake. Let's put a full year on the table both ways. The good year. The season runs long and dry. You added 8 pull-through 50 amp sites over the winter on ground you already owned. Rates rise 6% and nobody argues. 2 rallies fill 3 midweeks that used to be empty. Revenue reaches $620,000. Costs hold at $285,000. And you have $335,000 of net operating income against $175,000 of debt service. The bad year. The reservoir is drawn down through the summer. A new park opens 11 miles away with concrete pads and 50 amps at every site. Your second row trips breakers twice in 1 week during the hottest stretch of the year. 3 guests write about it. And peak occupancy falls from 85% to 62%. Meanwhile, the drain field needs work you cannot defer, and the insurance renews higher. Revenue falls to $470,000. Costs rise to $325,000. Net operating income of $145,000 against $175,000 of debt service. That is a year of writing checks in a business that looked full every weekend. The gap between those 2 years is $190,000 of income. And once a buyer applies a capitalization rate to it, roughly $2 million of value. Same lake, same gravel, same 60 rectangles. So if you buy one, understand what you are buying. You are not buying a campground. You are buying a fixed number of electrical and sewer connections in a place people already have a reason to go, and a decision about how to sell them. That decision is the whole business. Sell nights and you own a hotel, high revenue per site, real labor, a season, and a valuation based on how well you fill 150 of them. Sell months and you own housing, lower revenue, almost no labor, no season, tenancy law, and a completely different buyer. Both work. What does not work is failing to choose, because the choice gets made anyway. One autumn at a time, by a guest asking a perfectly reasonable question at exactly the moment you have no reason to say no. An RV park rarely fails, it converts. And nobody ever decides to convert it. The pads don't change, the business does.